Hey.
Good evening and welcome to another Mothman podcast. We are your number one source for sci-fi and paranormal podcasts. Also be listening for podcasts from Moth and Flame. You'll be hearing about hypnotherapy and mediumship.
And also, please like and subscribe and comment on YouTube. Follow us on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Instagram, Twitter, and more. And you can find out a lot more about our services on mothmanpodcast.com.
Good evening, everyone. Hi, I'm Daryl Rourke, and this is another Mothman podcast. Tonight, we're lucky to have some visitors here on the phone with us tonight, and we're going to be talking to Greg and Gail Hoag about their life and their experiences in the paranormal and some of the things that they deal with when it comes to I guess the magnetic waves of the earth in healing and all the give me
the sacred geometry.
Sacred geometry. Here you go. I'd like to introduce our group tonight. To my left is our tech person is
Bruce.
Bruce, and Bruce does all of our technical.
I'm also the lead paranormal investigator.
Yeah, when it comes to our investigations. With us tonight is Candace. Candace, you want to say hello to everybody and tell them a little bit about you?
Hey, everybody. I'm Candace. I'm better known on the radios as the Ramblin' Rose. And I joined up a couple of months ago, maybe a month or so ago. So
Candace comes from live radio, and she has a 60s program, and so she likes the music that I like. And I have my number one here person with me, Amanda. Do you want to explain a little bit about your background and what you do?
I'm Amanda, and I am a medium, and I see dead people, and I don't know. That's about it.
Amanda also works as our producer and helps with the audio part of this. So I want to thank you, and Greg and Gail. I want to say that you say hello and to our audience.
Well, thank you, Daryl. This is Gregory.
And Gail is sitting right next to him.
And Gregory, you've been in this for 40 years. You want to start off by telling us a little bit about you and what you actually do, and you're a scientist and a best-selling author. So let's really get into some of the things that you do.
Start from childhood. I'm really curious. I'm really curious, when you started getting into sacred geometry and astral projection and these things, and how old were you, and did you have paranormal experiences as a child? And so, I want to hear the whole story.
Well, I did have paranormal experiences as a child. Actually, I believed in fairies because I interacted with them and nature spirits. And finally, I think it was junior high, I had to let go of that because it wasn't popular. And when I was in high school, I had connections with higher realms where I knew things were being taken care of. But it was really when I was in my early 20s that I started exploring meditation, and I started sleeping in pyramids, and that culminated in the late 70s when I was still in my late 20s with a Kundalini experience, which is energy moving through my body so strongly that I actually had holes being burned in my feet from just walking on the earth. There was so much energy moving through my body. And I was very interested in paranormal metaphysics, and what I at that time realized was that when you are really open to it, this subtle energy is not at all very subtle. It was doing very powerful things to my body, and they weren't always comfortable. it was sometimes like having fire run through my nerves. But what it was really doing in the end was opening me up, allowing more and more energy to come through my body so that I could start interacting with higher dimensional beings and even beings outside of the dimensional system. And so that's where I started building geometries and building things, because I could almost see them before the energy, before it becomes physical matter. And I learned how to tune in and divine answers using a radionics technique of rubbing my hand or a stone or a piece of paper and getting a stick or no stick. And I started interacting with beings that were here to support us in our spiritual growth. And my path was working with sacred geometry and building antenna systems. And that's what really sacred geometry is, I feel, ultimately. It's working three-dimensionally to create a form that will resonate with energy just the way a C tuning fork will resonate with a C tuning fork. And so by building different resonant geometries, we can create a field that will start to align a human being with those higher energies when they are near it, meditating under it, or wearing it on their body, some of the smaller pendants and things that we create. Does that make sense? Are there any questions?
That's really interesting.
Brief history.
Yeah, that was great, Greg. Gregory, the towers you built around your property, I noticed in your video you spoke of towers that you built on the other side of the world. Now, how did you go about the alignment of these towers and getting the people to work with you, that sort of thing?
And what is the purpose of the towers?
Okay. One, some of them, I don't know if I'd call them towers. I mean, I have geometries 15 feet high, 20 feet high, 12 feet high. So large geometries on our property here. And then working with guidance. They give us feedback all the time. And one of the things that my guidance told me once was that Uluru in, Australia, Ayers Rock, used to be Ayers Rock. Uluru is the Aboriginal name. That is resonant with our property here in Colorado. And when I looked on a globe and saw that it's almost on the opposite side of the globe as to where we are. And so that's when I asked a friend who was down there if he would take a analog of the large form I have here on the land, a smaller version of it, and bury it near Ayers Rock. And I've done the same with other geometries that are one in Palenque in Central America, the southern part of Mexico, actually. And I have a number of those geometries around the United States to activate something called the overlay of the dove. That a friend of mine wrote a book called The Keys of Enoch, and that's J.J. Hurtak. He wrote that back in the 70s. Now, if any of you are familiar with it, it demonstrates an energetic overlay that's happening and needs to happen in the U.S. of the dove to help shift the energy. And so that's partially what I'm doing when I put these different geometries at different places and activate them, what happens is that we start to form an activation of the grid on the planet. And where we are in Colorado, we work with a planetary grid system, which is geometric in nature and in a way is similar to some of the meridian systems that run through the human body. And the planet, Mother Gaia, she has an energetic body that follows particular lines that are often called ley lines when it's on the surface. And when there are big nodal points of some of these energy lines, you have things like what happens in the Bermuda Triangle. And you know that there are places around the world like Egypt and the pyramids at Giza that are in alignment with some of those ley lines. And many of the churches in England have been explored in Taoist where they see those are on ley lines.
Yeah, I was going to say, even the White House in D.C. and the Empire State Building in New York are on ley lines.
You know, a lot of the founding fathers and people that were working here, especially in Washington, D.C., it's laid out so that it works with the energy of the area. And
what is the benefit of this energy work? Like, what is the world or even the United States or even down to the individual going to get out of this energy? Does it like help with health? I don't really understand exactly what it does.
Bottom line, human beings are like icebergs with only 10% of us showing up here in this 3D dimension. Mm-hmm. When you're working with ghosts, beings that have left this dimension and died to this dimension, they're in the fourth dimension, and as is our emotional body. So the emotional body can be affected by that. So the work that we're doing with the energy is to supply human beings with a clear field that is coherent and connected to the higher dimensional levels. This allows a human being to be able to be more intuitive, to be able to source their core of who they are through their heart center, and to be able to link more to soul. This allows a human being to advance more rapidly in their spiritual journey, which is ultimately the real reason we're playing this game in 3D, is to grow and learn and grow spiritually.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
And to evolve spiritually. By working with different energy points around the planet, Mother Gaia, the Earth, she's going through a lot of difficulty and distress. And she is wanting to advance spiritually and is in the process of doing that with or without us. And so some of what we do is to help her grow, to help plants and animals and minerals grow. They are also on a spiritual journey. They are existing in, when you're talking about spirituality, I like to think of densities as expressed in the raw material. And so plants and animals are around 2D in their spiritual growth, and human beings and many of the what we consider ghosts are still working in 3D, 3 density, the third density, and we want to evolve to a higher form of love and understanding, which is 4th density. Many of the ghosts and people that have deceased that you work with, some of them that are still around, that are seen often, have gone through a lot of trauma. and are in a different time sense than what we are here in the third dimension. So they can be caught up for what appears to us to be long periods of time. I think from their perspective, it may be a different distortion of time. But in the end, they still are open to having the light to support them in their evolution and to move on further. So they are not in a stuck position.
Can I ask you, do you work with the deceased? Do you ever work with like spirits to guide them to the light or anything like that?
Early on, my wife and I, in our spiritual development, we did that a little bit. Our first exorcism, as a matter of fact, was with a cat.
Oh, my goodness.
I figured, well, we'll start with something small. And it was interesting. This woman had a cat that was pulling the hair out of its rear end. It kept, clawing at it. And when we tuned in, you see, we're able to tune in and ask questions and get answers. And so we focus on what we've been offered as our service, which is helping people grow. But in that case, we were first learning, and what we found out is this woman so missed her first cat that when she got a new cat, she literally brought her old cat in to inhabit the body of her first cat.
Oh, wow.
And like a walk-in, but the old cat, the cat that she had as a pet hadn't left the body. So it had two bodies inside it.
Oh, my goodness.
There's a spirit inside with the other cat.
Mm-hmm.
So we exorcised that spirit and sent it back to the light to come back at another time in a natural progression. Animals often do reincarnate quickly to be with their owners.
Oh, wow. That's comforting.
The more a pet reincarnates with a particular owner, they start forming a bond. And that bond is a bond to humanity that is helping them leave their non-human, their animal thought pattern, animal gestalt. It's like to be an animal is more of a group mind, and to be a human is more of an individual mind. And so by...
You mean like pack mentality versus individuality?
Yeah, their individuality is starting to be developed where they're dependent on a human being for their food, and they're leaving the animal kingdom and old ways of how they have to be with the group, the pack animal with the dog, and hunting and so forth. And so they're in training to be human beings. They're some of the first that incarnate in the animal kingdom, are the ones that are pets for a while.
Aww. That's really cool.
Hey, Gregory, let me ask you, when you build your geometries, what are there certain materials that you use, like, for different things? Like does,
Yes.
Trying to think of
Does
how to word
something
it.
conduct better
Right,
than
yeah,
others?
like do each individual types of materials have their own purpose?
That's very true. And so when I'm building large geometries, I work with silicon bronze a lot, because when I weld, because it's strong and it's 96% copper. Copper is very important.
Very
in the way
conducive.
it conducts energy, and especially earth energy. Now, I build some forms. I just recently have been completing some forms that have a center rod of steel, and then I wrap that steel with copper coils and titanium coils as well. And then when I gold plate the whole piece, I have a core of steel, and then on the outside I have another geometry that is a woven of 3 wires, a coil that goes around it. It's in a way similar to a Tesla coil, which will give you a transduction of energies.
Yeah, yeah, I started to say it sounds like you're starting to build a radio. Yeah.
Like a giant electromagnet.
Yeah, right. Where you have different sized coils, sometimes at angles to each other or around each other, in order to transduce the energy to, and I have magnets in this particular geometry that I'm talking about. When you're working in some of the pendants and things that we make, I have about 35 different antenna systems inside. And it's even important sometimes if we work with glue. There are certain glues that are positive and some that are not like positive. Some things work with energy in proper ways, some materials don't. I work with fiber optic material. I mentioned titanium and silver and gold. I like to work with the materials that I'm being directed to work with, often that if they're metal, they're conductive. And in that way, it helps conduct energy in the electromagnetic spectrum here in the 3rd dimension. And what scientists don't totally understand is the electromagnetic spectrum extends into the 4th and 5th dimension. And so it exists on higher dimensions, as does light and sound and all of the energetics that we work with.
And we get a lot of our information from our guidance, from what you might consider higher dimensional consciousness, higher dimensional beings. There's a lot that we get from research and from scientific understanding. However, there's a whole mass of information that is beyond what we know as science today. So, for instance, when you ask about what materials, we always ask our guidance what specific materials, what dimensions, if there's a spiral, how many spirals are we using? There's a real important way of working with it so that we develop the kind of antenna systems that help people connect to the higher levels of who they are. We spend so much of our time just being very focused on what goes on in our physical life. Basically, the things that take precedent a lot of times are our jobs, how we pay our rent, driving from one place to another, a lot of things that anchor our awareness into what is tangible. And when we stop and think about what the creative self is really about, those are the aspects of us that are more intangible. Intuition is a very well-defined sense of who we are for some people, but not for others. However, intuition is very powerful in being able to direct us. That ability to really experience our life, express our lives more from a loving center, from a place of connecting to a much broader level of who we are. And so the antenna systems and the materials that we use, the different angles, they are all very important to developing our products as an energetic antenna system to connect people to the higher realms of who they really are.
Okay, that was a question I had coming from the radio world, obviously. The antennas are key. So when you say antenna, you're talking about a device that both relays and receives energy or signals?
That's very astute. We have a puppy here who says it's dinner time.
Aw.
I guess
everything that we're doing is it brings energy in, and it does send energy out. Now, the different antenna systems that we have going on in the pendants, what happens is it raises the vibrational level and the coherence of whatever is coming in. And it also does that same thing for that person's field. It's like a lot of us, we'll get caught up, we'll be angry about something, we'll be upset that something didn't go the way we planned, and that creates a field around us. By wearing a pendant, the kinds that we have designed, what happens is it changes a person's vibrational field such that it's really interesting. They start being more attractive. We've had so many people say people start being attracted to them.
That makes complete sense to me. Like, I wasn't really understanding at first how the energy related to the shapes and the sacred geometry that you have, and now I kind of understand. Like, it's sort of similar. Like, I would say what you produce is a lot stronger, but it's kind of like wearing a black tourmaline to kind of dissipate some of that energy that's negative so that you can receive more positive energy. Am I understanding this correctly? Or
yeah, that's a very good way to understand it and good analogy. The gems are wonderful. Everything in the natural world has gifts. The gems, their gift is that they can move energy from the fourth dimension, the higher dimensional realms, and move it into the body. And different gems have different gifts. Black tourmaline is wonderful for clarifying negativity, for helping with grounding. And then, and so we use gems in our pendants. It's partially for the beauty of it, but it's mostly to help the energy move that we're generating in the pendant, helping to move it into the body.
And I just want to point out that Gregory and Gail have some really beautiful, beautiful pieces of jewelry that will help you with your energy. And you can choose different ones. And just real quick, their website is iconnect2all.com. iconnect2all.com. So definitely check out their website to look at these. I mean, they're beautiful. They're absolutely beautiful.
And my daughter has purchased items from them, and she says that she's really got some great vibes from it. She gets a lot of compliments on the beauty of the jewelry, but she also says that she's felt better by wearing the jewelry. Now, Gregory,
was that after we met, Daryl?
Huh?
Yeah.
Oh, wow, that was neat.
Yeah. My daughter purchased some stuff from you guys.
Yeah.
Bruce has got a question here for you.
Interesting. And getting back to like the geometry piece of this, sacred geometry, it really speaks to the way that all life is created. Everything is energy.
Right.
And when you move from energy into form, there are very specific patterns and shapes and rhythms and flows that energy takes on in order to go from this higher level of, just pure energy into some very specific form. And so what we're doing is we're using some of those same patterns, and we know that inside of us. So people sometimes will look at our products and they'll go, oh my gosh, that's so beautiful. I can't tell you how many times I've been stopped in a checkout line at a grocery store where people, are commenting to me about the pendant that I'm wearing.
Oh, the pendants are gorgeous.
Very beautiful. However, energetically, it's very attractive. It gets people's attention because there's something that they recognize. There's some basic principles that it starts to trigger.
Yeah.
Because when it gets down to it, we all want to come back to that homing instinct of who we really are.
I agree. And before we go forward, Bruce has a question he wanted to ask you guys.
Well, it's more of a comment, and what I was going back to what Gregory was talking about when he was talking about vibrational energy. See, scientifically, what I know about the fourth dimension is usually described as a realm outside of time and space. Usually, it's described as time as a measurement, but the way I've always been taught about the dimensional, the fourth dimension is as far as the difference between our dimension that we, the third dimension that we live in and the fourth dimension is that our atoms vibrate on a different frequency than what the fourth dimension does.
Right.
And it's about those vibrational frequencies and how they overlap. That's why they're, I guess places like where ley lines and spiritual energy are high, like sometimes they can affect your own vibration. That's why sometimes it seems like the veil is thinner in some places. And I thought it was interesting that he was talking about the pendants with the antennas helping tune your vibrational energy, because that's the way I was always taught, the difference between the dimensions was the energy and the frequency on which the atoms vibrated.
And Gregory, I've been able to. Have you ever seen these pictures where you have to kind of defocus your eyes that you can see the image in the picture?
Yes.
I can do that around some individuals, and I can see a colored aura around them. Okay, if they're angry, it goes one color, and it's kind of a brighter, darkish. And if they're happy, it's a lighter color. So if you're wearing one of your devices, and this person, would their energy change? Could I visually see that aura change from before and after?
Yeah, Daryl, if you're that adept at seeing color shifts in people's auras, there's a very good chance that you could notice a shift. Amanda is very tuned in to energy, and so is Candace, and we all are, really, but sometimes we don't hone it as much as they seem to have. And so people notice the differences. And it's like when I was talking about energy shift, I had a grandmother who the biggest thrill in the world was when she got a pendant and her grandkids ran toward her instead of away from her. Now they crawl all over it. They were attracted to it. So it's like kids and animals, they pick up on energy.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Completely. Yeah. That's so true.
And human beings, this is something that's kind of been educated out of us. Mm-hmm. And, it's nice to have people like yourselves and more people being open to expanding their field. And what Bruce was saying about the energy, that's exactly it. You increase your vibrational level, and it's more than just the frequency, but it's the types of frequencies. It's the coherence of it. And when we're working with antenna systems, you see, as far as like sacred geometry, sometimes people think it's, just these things in books, or it's these temples that worked with it. But if you really understand sacred geometry, then you understand it's literally everything. Light has a geometric structure, and it fractalizes through certain geometries. Sound always gives us geometries that we can measure. And so even time itself follows geometric patterns and rhythms and cycles, as long as the 25,920 year precession of the equinoxes, which is something that, people are just beginning to understand in the metaphysical community, that there is this length of time, and yet it's very strange that that precise length of time was being used by the Mayans, by the Egyptians, by all the Vedic scriptures, and in India. and the Sumerians, they were all working with this period of time because it came from someplace in ancient history that is another whole topic that we can talk about.
I was going to say, do you believe that that this was knowledge to ancient cultures that, like you said, we have maybe taught ourselves to not believe, or do you think that there was guides? And if so, are we talking about like a visionary thing or an actual extraterrestrial type, or whatever you want to call it?
All of the above.
Okay.
I mean, it's like we've been interacted with extraterrestrially many times on this planet. There were we can talk about the Atlanteans. They were not of the same physical nature that we are. Mm-hmm. And something happened 12,000 years ago with a comet breaking up, and that's been proven, shown that there were tremendous things happening on this planet that precipitated a climate change called the Younger Dryas back around 12,000 years ago that wiped out a whole civilization in North America. And that 9,600 years ago, we went through a final re-meet of that comet, and that information that was being held on the planet by an ancient pre-Diluvian, before the flood civilization, it spread out to places like the Mayans and the Egyptians and into Eastern Asia and what was going on through Indonesia, where there was a land bridge almost all the way to Australia prior to the sea levels coming up over 350 feet 9,600 years ago.
Yeah, this is like post-Pangea.
So information has come in from extraterrestrial. It's come in from on the planet, different civilizations that have then gone out and spread agriculture and what was going on with, all of a sudden, all these plants were introduced. And there are incredible geometries and things in the land. Even here in America, there's over 10,000 mounds that just are kind of being ignored and not worked with or understood in South America. And there were many hundreds of types of plants that were all developed, like cocoa and bananas and so forth, and they all happened around the same period of time in South America about 10,000 years ago. So it's curious to watch all the way it comes together, and absolutely a lot of higher dimensional beings and beings that are interested in spiritual evolution and support of where we're going through as human beings. They come through all the time. They came through with ancient people, and they're coming through now and wanting to help. And these are some of the beings and energies that we work with. And it's how we focus our energy and stay open to that influx of what they want us to create in ways that will support people in creating the kind of lives that will support them in their growth.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's like sacred geometry has evolved over the centuries. I mean, going back to the Druids with the Stonehenge, like more primitive versions of sacred geometry always involve circles because of either the lunar cycles or the sun. And that's what a lot of the ancient civilizations prayed to, either the sun or the moon. Right. And then when like the Mayans and Incans and like the Egyptians came along, everything took more of like a pyramid, more of a pyramid shape. And it's kind of interesting to see how some of them are similar, even though they're completely different civilizations from different times.
So you're talking about being involved with the pyramids. Gregory, what do you think brought that on, the pyramid type shape? And we use that a lot in a lot of our beliefs right now.
Okay, there were things going on the planet where it's at a key crossover of energy points, and so it was working with the planet and stabilizing the planet. It was also an energetic tool for helping advance people spiritually, and it was misused by some of the spiritual groups that take over and start to control power things. And so there's a real power over running on this planet, has been for thousands of years. So that corrupted some of the, I think, more pure intent of the pyramids. But energetically, the pyramids were shifting things. Also, the way they were aligned, they helped to bring energy into the planet and create relationship with like the Orion system and other star systems. So that was the reason sometimes different buildings on the ground reflected what was going on in the sky, because they could connect back and forth, bringing energy in. But sometimes it's also sending energy out. I had, through one channel who was talking to me, I had different star systems approach me and ask me if they could use some of the geometries I built on this land, because they were working with our sun and they could pick it up through that geometry, and it can go what would seem like an unfathomable distance to us, hundreds and hundreds of light years, thousands of light years away. But they could connect in through the geometry and pick up on that energy and work with it and monitor it.
I have a quick question. Have you heard recently?
They did it with me. They did it with other people in the past.
Have you heard this week, or maybe it was last week, NASA came out saying that there is a FRB, the radio burst.
Oh, yeah.
The frequent radio burst. The signal that's coming in every 16 days. Do you have any opinions on that? Do you think that is a interstellar intelligent being perhaps that's trying to communicate, or do you think that this is more of a black hole situation? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I've been real curious about that too, because I think that it doesn't make sense to think that we are the only intelligent life forms
Agreed.
In the galaxy or anywhere out there in space. And why wouldn't higher intelligence beings want to connect with each other? It just seems sensible.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question about that. Like, how do you communicate with these entities or beings? And is it something that, like, we could all communicate with them? Is that a possibility?
Yeah, I think that it's part of, as we develop our intuition and our higher powers, we realize that when people die, for instance, it's not as if their consciousness dissolves. They leave the body, and these entities still are part of this conscious field that we're a part of. And when Gregory was talking about coherence before, it's important to realize that in our regular, three-dimensional lives, we're living in a resonant field that's pretty jarring. There's a lot of different things that work to get our attention and take us kind of out of that real centered place.
Yeah.
And when we meditate, for instance, we become more centered. When we work with the sacred geometry tools that we create, even when you're not meditating, you can be more centered because you are part of developing a coherent field that doesn't get bounced around by all the different distractions.
Yeah.
So, like, people sometimes will say, well, you know, do you have anything that could protect us from EMFs? And we always say, well, it's not possible to cut out all the EMFs. That's absolutely impossible. However, if you're thinking about needing protection, then you're resonating from a place of fear.
Mm-hmm.
And you change that when you shift into connection. What you're doing is, when I am connected to all that is, when I'm connected to my higher self, to guidance, to, you know, the greater sphere of consciousness, then I am strong. I'm in a coherent field. And when I work from that, I have so many different opportunities that are really significantly different. So, you know, I believe that we all have this capability. We all have the ability to become more intuitive, creative beings.
How would you define the higher self?
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's important, though, to realize that we're all unique. We all have different gifts, different opportunities, to be of service. So to connect with the same beings doing the same thing, it may be totally unique for you in a different way. Part of it is our life stream, what we've been doing lifetime after lifetime, which has been a lot of the revelation of going through the Kundalini and moving to higher realms. I could see some of the other lifetimes, and especially if they were relevant for learning or knowledge. And we've seen, but you talked about seeing dead people. It's like, what is important to be of service? Like, when Gail and I were married, we were spending time, we both got sick. We've been working so hard to pull the wedding off that we both got sick and just stayed home and watched videos for a week. But what happened was Gail went to the kitchen to get some food, and we were looking at pictures from the wedding, and I saw someone at the wedding. I closed my eyes, and this guy was there every time I closed my eyes. Very, very vivid. He was wearing a three-piece suit. It was blue. He had blonde hair, a round head, big blue eyes. And finally, I'm going, Gail, what's going on? I keep seeing this guy at our wedding, and he wasn't there. I don't recognize him. And as it turned out, she tuned in and channeled him. It was my father. And he was showing me how he was going to look in his next incarnation.
Oh, wow,
and
that's cool.
He told me where he was going to incarnate, with whom, and when. And I went there, and here's this baby, blonde-haired, round-headed, blue-eyed baby. And he said he didn't recognize who I was, and when he was incarnated as my father, and that he was going to come back and be my student. Now, you know, our ideas when we're in between lives sometimes don't pan out exactly when we're in the third dimension again.
Yeah.
Because we forget. There's a veil of forgetfulness. So if he ever comes into my life, I certainly will recognize him. I know who he is. And yet I had to let go of him as my father, because that's not the part he was playing anymore.
Yeah.
He was certainly passed from this third dimension in that body, but I didn't think of him as dead. I thought of him as, actually, I had a much deeper experience of him after that than I ever did when he was alive. I mean, I really went, wow, here's a soul that recognizes me and wants to interact with me, and that's why he chose to be my father. And we all choose the parents, the siblings, the relatives that we have, so that we can learn and grow and interact and be together. And it's such a miraculous journey. And to be playing it out and to support beings in this process, it's quite remarkable.
Yes, it definitely is.
Do you believe in the twin flame concept?
The twin flame process?
Yeah, or the concept of the twin flame. Do you believe in that? Do you believe that there are people whose energies we have been associated with since time began, and we will seek each other out one way or another?
I certainly experienced that with a lot of individuals where I've recognized them from past lives, and I was really getting into it for a while, and all of a sudden all these people were coming up. Yeah, we've had this past life, and we've done this and done that. And I know with my wife and I, we've been together many times, and it's like when we met in this lifetime, it was almost like a recognition that we had work to do.
Mm-hmm.
We recognized that before we even realized, a few weeks later that we wanted to be married,
mm-hmm.
because it would further our work, our connection.
That's beautiful.
And
that's
so,
part of the twin flame idea, is that those people that you seek out and that are part of your energy innately are there to help you on your spiritual journey to grow in some way or another.
Yeah, we're very much in line with that, and it was really fun because when Greg and I met, like he was saying, we had like an innate recognition. It took us almost no time to get together. I think we met in the beginning of June, and we were married the following November.
And we would have done it sooner, except that was the only time. The Jewish minister, I mean, he was a metaphysical minister, and his persuasion, he was Jewish as he grew up.
Oh, my gosh.
He said, his wife called us, in midsummer and said, I know when you're getting married, this is when Frank is going to be in town. I interrupted you.
That's awesome.
Anyhow, I think that's it should be as we become more attuned and in tune,
mm-hmm.
We have more serendipitous experiences, and that's normal for us to recognize, to draw in something that really works. And a lot of times our programming tells us that we're making mistakes, or this isn't right, or whatever. And the universe is brilliant. It doesn't make mistakes. Our perceptions are what really are needed to shift so that we can look at what's going on and learn from it. We can seek out the opportunities that are there. And, when we're in resonance, things happen where, you just meet the right people. That phone call comes in. Mm-hmm. Everything syncs up. And that's part of what we're really after with being in that resonant field, a real field of coherence, because then everything just happens so much
falls
easier.
Together.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to come back to the twin flame. Sometimes people are so driven by that they miss the opportunities that are there with the people that are around them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if it's meant to be, it happens. It's effortless.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to be careful of how much effort you expend because of a concept in your head,
right.
And you miss the joy and the gift that's there in front of you. Plus, I wanted to share something that a friend of ours, who's also very intuitive, and we were just visiting them, spending time with them this last week, and she mentioned a time with her father, and in her family, her father left fairly soon, but her mother used to have to lock the door because she was afraid that he was going to kill her. And there was a lot of fear, a lot of anger that she held against this character because of the way he was in her life, her father. Mm-hmm. And yet, after he had passed, there was a time where she's very intuitive. She connected with him. It was somewhat unintentionally, but he was talking to her about how much he loved her. And she's kind of going, what? What do you mean? Look how you were during that lifetime. And he said, that was our contract. I had to play that part. And I really have so much love and desire to support you in your growth and your well-being. So we have to be careful in the way we perceive all of this reality and always go for what we're learning to open our hearts with and the love that we're expressing and feeling, and try not to let the condition of the world throw us off into a negative funk, because, you know, ultimately this world is here to help us open our hearts and express more love and to find other human beings that we can share that with in as pure a way as possible.
Greg, with that being said, that was beautiful. With that being said, we're going to close out tonight's episode, and we hope that we can get you and your wife back with us next week. And so we would like to really thank you for being on our podcast tonight, and we will look forward to more of your experiences and your knowledge next week on Mothman Podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.
And good night from Mothman Podcast.